debate on specific sociological, psychological, or political. And I might as well start with a very brief statement borrowed from fact what you were saying. I kept repeating you, but I'm glad that you said that. I wanted to start by a very specific. Pathak used to say that all my writings are oriented towards directly or indirectly violence and non-violence. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not that. Maybe in an age when we are deep becoming a certain part of our lives, and that it has to be. But maybe it's also because the nature of life has changed dramatically in our lifetime, which you are not seeing. You are seeing its final results. I just stated a brief note. I was very seriously, so I lost all my memories also. But I certainly remember two things. One, that whether you like it or not, this century, 20th century, we go down in history as a particularly decisive century, where nature of human violence has gone very far. This was supposed to be to meet the past history of the 20th century. You might say the beginning of the anti-colonial consciousness in not only in India but whole of South Asia and also in Africa and also in Latin America. So this is a global thing I'm talking about. Let me be very clear about it at the beginning. Globally, we have lived in a century where two or three things were made often without people noticing. One, a huge attempt to depend on ideology. The experience of French Revolution being a success was there in the air, and everybody from, say for instance, what we begin to example, from the people, from the Napoleonic to the times ideologies gradually began to strident voice. And we were expected to make a choice. And maybe at beginning when we were adapted, but I have seen that my friends and I myself were being closely attracted by ideologies. By the time we were 12 or 13, I lost my faith, parental faith. By 12 or 13, and I became my brother became a kind of leftist. And I became also leftist, I would say, that is broadly speaking, left. And this stayed with me a long time. And I thought the debates on debates on how public debates on it. And then to enlighten me, it took me years to find out that it is an incomplete way of looking at it. You are looking at ideologies not for its sake. You are looking for ideologies because in your inner sense, you need this kind of security. Opposite of kind, intellectual security, you want a frame in which you can fit your ideas and that includes even further there, I then gradually found that around this kind of thing, there is also a lot of prosperity involved. The ideology which is supposed to deliver us freedom, even freedom, even deliver us a good vision of life, an ideal, even in fact, Sudipta Kaviraj has written a Bengali book where the book's title is, that is, they start with Marxist concept of sovereignty. So the utopia is not how you actualize after dying. Utopia is in this life to ensure that it is landed, the heavens will come to us. It gradually became obvious to me as to many others that this is something too much difficult. We are human beings. We can force people up to a point. We can kill people at the point for our sake of our version or ideology. But gradually, the charm of revolution, the thing that is, French Revolution is, I might say, almost post-humans, or rather, a new way of looking at handling the tyranny. All life was advanced and happened, and that also is a lot of cruelty. Now, new books have come and stuff saying the French Revolution, the most dignified part for people to die were the royalty. Because even in royalty, they didn't do the things. They didn't abuse anybody. So there was something. I don't have to tell you. If you, I'm sure all of you have noticed today that throughout South Asia, few people mention the ideologies and everything, particularly leftist ideologies. Now the fashion is of course Hindutva. This is of course ideology. And that is not my take. It is our take. Hindutva is not Hindutva. Hindutva stands for civic principle for a country's people. It is a nation. A nation is called. People forget that. Everybody has his own way of doing it. Like Yogi Adityanath will agree with me. There's no Hindutva is very specific. I will speak with you in front of you, how you live, and he did so well. I believe that. Must have tasted nice to you. That's liberty. So this has happened. Yes. Next step. Now, the major process of this has come from it became different revolution, but it survived in the new organization of nations and states. In 17th century, where nation states were defined well, and people thought that it was. So that also is new, and I'm not saying anything new. But what is new is this, that as the 20th century went forward, these nation states have to maintain that peace and whatever technology, what is about various ones, and so even colonialism, they are justifying that. In some kind of political way, by introducing an element of portrait in political judgment. You produce. It is okay. Can you hear?
No, sir. ये बोल भी रहा है ना, ये बोल भी रहा है, कितना तेज करोगे?
Where you have a new check on you, namely that you could not kill your opponents in a democracy system. You can defeat him in an election, but you can also, without mentioning it in that way, develop a theory of hatred on the opposition. These are things, what is this also? The Marxist species separate from the socialists. In coffee house also. So and so. So ideology was a very interesting dividing. And also as time passed, Nation states began to cultivate the style of spreading hatred. There is no reason why an Indian Muslim cannot go to Pakistan unless he has a criminals or anything that is different. Because they are related there. There is no way an Indian Muslim scholar who is trying to go to Pakistan can be a spy. Some Pakistanis might think that. Pakistani ISI might think. But no Pakistani intellectual will think that. Nonetheless, you have to go and work through this take a lot of burn a lot of night persuading some minister. We did a study of Pakistan law in just one example. We had some amount of money, my full foundation. This was the time of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was a very liberal. We were not fanatic, very popular. He was a prime minister. So he said that you cannot, he said, we want to also live in Pakistan and Bangladesh. Because the rights to say no business in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And gave them enough money. So the bureaucrats objected. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee agreed with them that that's not the case. You cannot give money because money is coming from home. You don't like to perform it. Why there is no reason why you should not give money to Pakistan. They are okay. Their army is spending. Now, bureaucrats are also adverted, not applied. Very long time in they are just saying that they are how they escape. Now we try. There's no. You can bring them in a conference. You can bring them in a meeting, but no money goes to Pakistan. Why was the problem? We are not deducting any money from that. You spend all the money. But I could have said, well, you did. And that very day, the bureaucrats very happily signed it. We'll get it. But I didn't have the heart to say and supplement the project by saying that while we will get the refugees from Pakistan, refugees from Bangladesh, but nonetheless, I would like to know who killed them and who they are in Pakistan and Bangladesh. What is their way of looking at it? So we are doing very important study. And we wanted to find this killers. Now, victims were Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh. And here is a government, a Hindu majority. Prime Minister is officially a Hindutva. But you don't want to hear the culture thing to, who killed him, by what for, and what was the nature of the suffering. So many of them did just like that. What was the kind of cruelty they faced? So, what happened to their property? Also, their children. But this is something to understand that many people very allow us to do it. And so this is the hatred. Idea of spreading hatred is this, that you don't touch the country, you don't touch the that hatred is a main tool now in hands of nation states, and it is all over. And I would suspect that hatred is your enemy. Because your hatred doesn't end with your hatred. Your hatred ends with the other party hating you back. It also depends, and it also aspires that you learn to hate even within your family. Your cousin who trying to divide your property. So on and so forth. Hatred is comparative. And this is a very extremely dangerous. I mean, this is not only in India. I have seen this in so many genocides. I have done a study of comparative genocides. This hatred is a crucial factor. It was instigated. Like for example, in the this what it is called. The last people were Middle East Muslim there. Bosnia genocide. Now, Bosnian genocide, before that, nobody had heard of any difference. They didn't know that they were different from the others. Muslims were different from the others. There were so many marriages that they couldn't even say whether it was so or so Muslim or not. That fact, it was so close. And he interviewed the team which studied, and they said everywhere that this state by a few persons like Malikowski and others, one of the reasons I feel now bad is memory. But now good that this how this hatred people take it up Israel has told these fighter pilots, given targets to kill the head of the Palestinians. Hamas and also the key figures. And you have a right to kill that man. If you have to kill 20, up to 20, well, have a feeling. This is a major. Now the question is, what about Lord I find that people are often, how to not do that. I did a very great note on Nelson Mandela. He was at the beginning of his career, he was a rebel, violent revolution, going ago. Then that failed, and he joined the Communist Party. That also he had after a while. Then he ran away from South Africa, and outside being South Africa, he started propagating in South Africa. And that after all this, when the day came, he was almost by universal acclaim, all of us, that he is the right person to do. Because though he has been going through this violent process, he doesn't like violence. Probably he was also interested in something. And he, the first thing he did after becoming president of South Africa is to go to his jailer, who was tortured. And then he also went to the apartheid leaders and visited them personally. And the idea was that, and he was not at all open to any ideological attack. Gradually, he was looking for what I professionally call on BPI. So it became a matter of regimes of hatred and regimes on BPI. And that is the
Now I
see the hatred in his life. I don't see seriously. Those are too many. And these people were and I left my brief notice on whether wars can even also have their culture. First World War had some breaks. There were breaks. One Christmas, suddenly the German side, where the French warfare were going, it's a very cruel warfare. The German soldiers started singing the Christmas carols. Whole army. And the British forces joined. So there are human things like that. In the Second World War, it has become very different. Once in First World War, also gas was tried out. They were afraid that others will also have. So, the second one was very different. I mean, I can give you so many signals that I don't want to begin a lecture there. On and on. It was a perfect example of hate culture. And there is one line I quoted from Joseph Mengele, the famous or notorious rather doctor who chose people who goes to death, immediate death, and who survives to work as a slave labor. So, as a doctor, he was perfect. And there was a case of one Jewish woman who was pregnant and was about to deliver. So, Joseph Mengele was perfectly good for that. He did everything that a midwife would do, or a good doctor, gynecologist or Christian would do. He sanitized everything. All the way from that to cutting that umbilical cord, he did perfect. And then, after that, within half an hour, he would know, assigning them to the crematorium state. Mother and a child, both. So that is what his culture does. Second one about that I can, the best example is Hiroshima. The American generals and naval admirals were against dropping a bomb on Hiroshima. They said, Hiroshima, there's only one or two things in storage of army. There's nothing there. It has not, nobody has owned it. So it has no military significance. The scientists wanted to do. Later on it transpired that they wanted a perfect measure of the destructive power of nuclear bomb in Hiroshima. Because Nagasaki was a military target. So firstly it was bomb. So that measurement was not accurate. Here, you have absolutely perfect how much damage that accuracy of science. Science has some role in this also. So that's that. I will take it. So that I say, I conclude that the culture of the First World War was to some extent more primitive, almost backdated. And the culture of the Second World War was highly scientific, highly modern. And this is the best example of this kind of best example of what they can.
Yeah. So on that note, let's move ahead.
Yes.
As it appears, there is some sort of Faustian picture in which we find history of ideology is equal to history of violence, history of hatred, right?
Correct.
But then we also notice, in your personal biographical journey, you have also transcended your early stage of fascination with certain kind of ideology. You realized through your exposure to various kind of materials coming in literature, Bengali literature, also also some of these, you return to Tagore and Gandhi in a very big way much later to address this anxiety about history of ideology, which becomes history of violence, history of hatred. But then there is also this, it seems from this whole narrative that there is a scope, as you said, some kind of a conviviality may emerge. As we have seen in Gandhism, certain notion of ideology, I don't know whether it can be called ideology, but it is some, in Gandhi, some kind of value orientation.
Value orientation, that's a different thing.
That is a different thing.
I mean, even clearly said that my these are as old as the hills. There's nothing new.
Yeah, in a different way, he had some other kind of usage of the word Sanatan, and he had to talk about his value orientation to indicate that it comes from the whole civilizational context. We have also read some of the students who read your fascination for Franz Fanon, and you at one point of time you felt that what Fanon had to give to post-colonial Africa was actually something very conducive for even post-colonial South Asia, and it was. But Fanon, we know that there is some kind of ideology even in Fanon, isn't it?
Yes. But
Internationalism, but there is some kind of ideology.
But another leftist, Dr. Pathak, had followed the path of Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. Yeah, so the scope is larger. Probably what it is indicating us is that perhaps the need to explore furthermore all sorts of strands of ideas. I remember you had a great deal to talk about Tagore's idea of nationalism, for example. And it's an antithesis to nationalism that Tagore offers. And so would you like to say, it's a good reminder. Tagore's nationalism is his critique of nationalism is a good reminder for us as to how to deal with ideology.
Yes, one has to really take position on that. I mean, it is not necessary that nationalism should not only be head driven by head. And that the idea is very clear that it is militarized. That was RSS thing. Even RSS people.
How do they react? Just curious, did they react to you? What was their response?
No, कम हो गया अभी उस वक्त पैसा था we used to laugh at it and then they took it from nicely actually not the headquarters of the so I think we should tease them because they had this idea even the dress was copied from the British Army.
Yeah, but they had a liking for your critique of modern science. That's what I have heard.
That really. Yes.
They felt that there is some kind of wavelength matching. They also had a criticism. In the early days, they had a criticism of modern science.
Yes. Afterwards, they changed it to Bajaj and other companies. They made necessary and necessary from that kind of science. So that's one way of saying. But we fundamentally we are now in a peculiar condition where some people take the ideologies which we take so seriously. Almost like a game. Almost like a game. Kari is a famous Marxist leaders of the British Australia. He was once invited by France, somebody in France, to give a lecture in Paris. So he was to go the next morning. While previously he was sitting at home, a policeman came in London. He was surprised. What was it? The commissioner of police had sent this man to take some message. What was the message? He said, I have been told by the commissioner that to warn you that when you are going to Paris to give this lecture, look, I have heard your lectures so many times and enjoyed it. But the French do not understand English as much, so on and so forth. So don't take it too far because they will arrest you. So this is the way their own commissioner this fire lectures are all right for me. That's the way. So that also is coming. I mean, I noticed that it already Marxist rights. Some have died. Unfortunately, the hard, cut up, they have died now. But it was obvious for the last 5 years or 5 years what will happen in them. They should have made this much earlier, they would have had better terms and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the area where this settled in India, that is very sad because most of the people here are tribals. A huge number of them are women. They also in Andhra. This is the way it is. Anyway, I will now. It's up to you.
Yeah, so we'll also take a few questions from here and there. If there is none, then I will fill in, but I'm sure there will be some questions. Try to be a little kind, and by being kind, you can keep your questions slightly precise, easy to grasp. But while they're thinking, so how do you see, I mean, I'm just trying to invoke a little bit of prophetic attitude in you. How do you see human conditions in coming time? Would there be some other kind, would there be some vision for human development in coming time? Just pushing you to persuading you.
That you need, of all things, you need a system which doesn't suffocate all this and which allows you to big freedom of life, which you have enjoyed for life, long life, not by this still, I mean, the way they handle the Gujarat Raj thing, the Malali film, it's terrible because it is very clear that it was something like a clear-cut Hindu-dominated academy. I said it during the last election, very repeatedly in different times, that yes, they are responsible for the riot, but that is one riot, and you will not see any riot. So that's the thing. So that's the way to look at it. Now this, and it's natural. It's natural. It's that the dominant community finds it easier to their scores are higher as far as the killings go.
Yeah. So beyond those ideological lines, which they will call left, right, or center, we are
In the streets of Ahmedabad, it has been reported that people were standing naked men so that they can rape Muslim women, they can try to free.
yes. So with a complete sense of freedom, they can raise their critical voice and ask the people to feel safe here.
Sir, when you talk of nation states and the idea of nation states in the context of South Asia, so sir, when you talk of nation states and the idea of hatred, so do you think the idea of nation state when applied to South Asia, it limits the idea of South Asia, like it narrows the scope of South Asian history? Like, is it a narrower version of when we study the idea of South Asia? So does the concept of nation state narrows our lens, the way we see South Asia?
Is nation state an impediment to understand the broader idea of South Asia? Right?
Very
Your
good.
essay,
Very good.
your essay on idea of South Asia.
My personal vision is this, that South Asia is geographically figured in such a way, natural, the nature has done this. The 2 billion years of that African place between Africa place to travel to this place, through the Arabian Sea, become this is the plate to meet and create the Himalayas over 2 billion years. It's said one. It has made the situation such that the South Asia remains, South Asia is incomplete. Every country in the South Asia is incomplete in itself. And these are countries, this whole the diversity of languages, even that is under attack. Last year was said 1,500 languages, now it says 1,200, 300 vanished. They will vanish. And I am sure other languages will vanish. So, every language is an encyclopedia. It is a way of life. It is a culture of life. It is a civilizational statement. And that diversity enriched us. That diversity enriched us. I still hope that we will have a time when some kind of a big confederation will come, not as a one state, but maybe one kind of very commonwealth.
negation of each other to prove that we are South Asian. That was your line. You remember? That is, somebody has to prove that one is Indian, one has to prove that one is not Pakistani. So that would not be the situation in the Commonwealth.
Once I was listening to a interview of a Pakistani scholar. He said, but that you are a part of the Muslim world. We are not part of the Muslim world. But we are different. We are Hindu Pakistanis. What do you do here? And they forward. This is from our station. Radio station.
So I have a question. You spoke about hate and hate. Can you be audible? Yeah. So you spoke about hate, and I wanted to know that do you think hate has metamorphosed into what you term as a spectacle? In one of your works on films and protagonists, you use the spectacle framework from Rolla Barthes. And you said spectacle, in spectacles everything is very binary-istic. It's either good or bad. So do you think the way we are witnessing violence in Palestine, in Gaza and everything, do you think it has more to do with the spectacle of it than the rhyme or reason of why this hate persists right now?
You have to be, again say it a little bit so that
Sorry.
She's asking whether hatred has become some kind of spectacle in our time. I also remember she was giving an example of your writing. I also remember that you had discussed at one place plane hijacking by youth as some sort of aspirational recreational activity. Yeah, so in that sense, is hatred today celebrated because it has acquired a spectacular form?
yes, but it is not even hatred in this case. It was like almost like a picnic. So they have to do something.
The hijacking.
And all the and it was not my effort to give it full. All I've done is this: I've taken the first pages of newspapers, and started what there was, how dangerous it was, and how this will encourage other terrorists. And how now it is unlikely that these people will be released, and so on and so forth. If they are released, then they will again ask for Kurdistan. So on and so. All these things are and Mr. Subramanian, famous strategic analyst, a good friend of mine, he said, no, his son is the foreign minister. He said that I don't know how the terrorists in the bomb plane produced two bombs to threaten them in the plane. We'll bust this bomb, throw this bomb. Just 6 months. And this is that kind of thing. And in 11 and 12 pages, or 15 pages, or 16 pages newspapers, there were small items. And I began to read them, and I was very surprised. Some of them talked about the ages of these people. The oldest was something like 35 or 40. And the youngest was 12, or 14, 13, 14. Then they had gone and I think Bangala or somewhere they had stopped. And they allowed the said that by singing Hindi film songs. Now, and then how to go to Saran, that the man said, the leader went down first, stood on the ground, and one by one apologized to everybody for doing this, and respectfully say that we have had to do this. Now, after this, I would have thought it would be of doing that is to have probably called them and give for a dinner and give them some scolding. That's the problem. Just say that that's when how dangerous it is to be this sort of country and so forth. And the bombs which the great strategic analyst talked about, it conspired out to that they have made bombs out of these newspapers. Of which that the passengers were reading and 100 bombs or 100 bombs. So this I think was very accurate.
Yes.
Sir, I'm not a student of sociology. I just wanted to understand what is the South Asian understanding of development. Because when I read development, I see it as a very capitalist perspective that we are only concentrated towards human development, and we forget that development should be an overall development. Values of South Asia were such that it did not just concentrate on humans but also the overall entire environment, culture, everything.
That of course is there. You're right.
So why do we only discuss
But
human
I
development?
should get back. I'm going to add that this whole thing the South, what they call Asian tigers. Asian tigers. All the way up to Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, Cambodia, and even Vietnam. So this whole bunch and that thing is absolutely clearly laid out in how that what is the logic. That's what and part of the story, the important part of the story is this, that each of these countries, successful countries, became authoritarian, dictatorial. Each of them. So I can that the thing in India was also technically bad. So we don't fully acknowledge that it is, I mean, only one person did that, that this is nothing, he began his speech in India and Assam Center. Okay. We all have elected a dictator to our people's elected. So that's the yes, you will get the South Asian style of development, but cost. Don't forget the cost.
In the beginning, you talked about how people came on the ideologies were censored.
Ideology for security. People are attracted to ideology for a sense of security.
Yes.
But can we also extend that argument to say that people cling on to ideologies, rather hide behind ideologies to short of accountability?
Accountability.
Very good.
Oh, yeah, sure. Something. That's very important. And in fact, that is why it has now gone a kind of a withdrawal or something. And people don't hear their voice now. Official position is very clear of Marxist party. When said that CPM, that largest political Marxist party, it said that we do not think Modi is protected. They said that completely.
You talked about then people denounce it is denounced as primitive, quote unquote, primitive way of doing politics, or communal way of doing politics, or denounced as amoral. But don't you think the way of how it operates, how the ideology operates, how it operates on the ground via rights, programs, etc. Don't you think it is essentially modern and secular as opposed to what is being said and it is being
People say that Hindutva politics is not very modern, but you is asking, and I suppose you have also written about the modernity of Hindutva politics. Hindutva politics. Modernity of ideological politics, yeah.
Copy of the modern democracy. Knowing the modern world.
essentially modern and secular.
No doubt.
So violence of modernity is also associated with this ideological politics of any kind. I remember your reading of Hindu Swaraj and Mahatma Gandhi's criticism of all these modern professions. So it's probably one has to check the violent trajectory of Hindutva politics also, keeping in mind the trajectory of modernity.
I mean, the way I changed some of these things, but when I was young, and I spoke to their thing, because a lot of friends of my cluster was there. So they would also call on those who have done made some errors or become indisciplined or something of the members, and then call them, and they will come there, and they will like a they are jersey.
Just
They will have this epaulette, like the British Army had. So that will be another way for somebody to come from RSS, then dress and get hearing. And they would take also their belt, and taking it off themselves and put it on. That is you are kind of disowned for a while.
okay.
All the ideas of and whatever it was. When we do any of them, there are all classmates.
This is also a line, what the question is asking is also your starting point in the book, which is ending. That when the British left, almost going through that Freudian psychoanalytic process, we internalize the values of the oppressor. And we have been trying to prove that we are as efficient oppressor as our predecessors. So,
Like, point of thinking is sedition law.
yeah.
The very idea of the sedition law is an encouragement to sedition.
Sada.
Okay, I will just give one example. Sorry, just to give an example, how this sedition thing about. Only few years ago, sorry, only few years ago, there was election. Because Scotland will be having to offer join. So it went on. Everybody said that
Brexit.
but nobody took very seriously. And even after the majority was wanted to play with England, other technical sporting, that is lost. That's a different thing. That's a different kind of thing. You will notice that you might do that someday, do this. I can do another example. In Africa, when Liverpool was there was a they wanted to live. So, nobody was strong. Nobody was strong. They said, you want to say what? They don't take it. Yes, vote. They said, all right, go ahead. And they invited all the public from Liverpool to meet. And invited them to go there for the opening ceremony. So these people went there and had a great grand feast there in a new country. Similarly with Singapore. Singapore became separated from life. No shedding of tears on either side. They didn't even change the names of the British names, English names. All of them. Even now. This is good for business. As simple as that. This is the way world is. We take everything too seriously. The sedition of in the part.
We take the last question. Last or second last? Second question. Keep it short.
Hello, sir. As since you are one of the great contributors to this novel study, and we have got an opportunity to read your work, intimate and this kind of great work, I have a question regarding the post-colonial study. How does post-colonial study as a field negotiate with the larger question of nation state? Question of the nation state.
Nation state.
Yes, particularly.
Nation state.
Post-colonial study thrives on decolonization, at the same time reimagining society based on this new framework. Right? India has so many cultural religious traditions. On which framework, on which tradition, on which culture this nation state will be built if you follow the post-colonial framework? For example, in your own work, there is a chapter called Gandhi and Uncolonized Mind. How?
He doesn't like that the idea that Gandhi was uncolonized mind. What is the problem with that idea? Why are you saying that Gandhi was an uncolonized? What is your point?
Says that in the whole of South Asia, there are only whole of South Asia, in last 2000 years, there has been only two South Asians who have made have a universal space. Yes, sir. Huh?
Gandhi and
Nandy and Leo. Buddha and Gandhi. Those were the part we follow. Buddha and Gandhi. That's not all India. And I think I like was they decided to be after Gandhi decided to give 12 Latin American countries statues of Gandhi. And they very proudly put this ambassador. And then even some of them replied that we already have. So, it's only one country didn't have it. Got it up, yes. Everybody has access to it. So it is that way.
last one.
Okay, so, sir, do you think the hatred that is given to ideology is derived from religion? For example, we refrain from talking about religion when we talk about hatred related to ideology due to our compulsion of being morally correct and politically correct.
No. Can we talk about religion? Even though we are worried about.
When we talk about ideology, is religion an inevitable part of the conversation? But we usually refrain from talking about it due to our sense of being politically correct.
Basically, you want to blame religion for ideology.
Should we be blamed?
Yeah. Can we think that religion is the source of all kind of disturbing ideology?
Hatred towards ideology.
It's what I say.
How do you interpret religion?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so
So like you make a distinction between the statist and the cultural nationalism. So like every culture has its own ideology as well. Ideology can be rooted in that it leads to some sort of violence, and cultural like even though cultural nationalism is something which is rooted in lived reality, but that can also culminate into a political ideology which can be violent. So I'm just saying that even cultural nationalism can act as more violent than what we understand as the statist nationalism, which is
yes,
rooted in
it's something that cultural nationalism, and of course that is your point as well, that cultural nationalism can be equally violent ideology.
It
want to say something more?
No, I just wanted to say.
I'm sorry.
Where did you get this inspiration from? Americans or apartment? This idea like he was in a very thin bus. Maybe drive the bus. And there was this, everybody was very crowded, and they were holding on this. So, this woman found that somebody is exploring her body, and she gave it a grounding slap. And then somebody pointed out to her that he is blind. He was just trying to find out what to do. So what is there? This woman immediately was broke down.